Well, hello, folks. This is Idiots versus Idiots. My name is Danny. I'm joined always by my cowboy-hatted associate, the Big Man.
I am the big man.
As if he is the only large man in Texas. As if there isn't the entire city of Beaumont, Texas, that makes him look like Paris Hilton.
Well, I actually was on a call this week where, other people introduce me as the big man all the time. It's my brand,
right.
Yada, yada. Anyway, I was on this call, and this guy was trying to be, how people, when they're trying to sell you something, they're trying to get you to sign up for something, they're very proper. And he's like, Mr. the Big Man. He kept calling me Mr. the Big Man. And I'm like, that doesn't work. Just stop it. I appreciate it, but no.
I jokingly refer to your wife as Mrs. the Big Man.
Yes.
And that's only because I have transference fear, meaning you're afraid, so I'm afraid of you. I haven't even met the lady, and she's probably delightful.
Hey, there's only two things on this planet that I was ever afraid of, and one of them, he died years ago, and my wife. Anyway, what are we talking about today, Danny? Woo!
All right, we got to let you know about one thing here. Over at Idiots versus Idiots, sure, you did not know this, but you should have by now. We are death peddlers. That is right. We peddle the death of plastic pollution. Not only does liquid death murder your thirst, 10% of every can sold goes to end plastic pollution. And frankly, my friends, I have to tell you, it is a superior water delivery system. I just realized at the start of today's show that I'm out.
Well, yeah, right? I was fixing to say, you usually have like 15 empty cans on your desk in front of you. Okay, right. I don't know how Liquid Death could sponsor us any more than it does on your desk.
That's
usually.
Right.
So,
Unfortunately, I feel like I'm kind of a junkie because I realized I was out. I was like, oh man, what am I going to do, man? Am I going to just drink regular water out of a bottle?
We can't have that. We can't have it.
If you use code IDIOTS10 on liquiddeath.com, you will get 2 free koozies with your order. Are you ready for the next story, sir?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay, Mr. Big Man. An incumbent, established media conglomerate.
Yes.
I'll tell you, a half hour before we started recording the show, I was on the phone with someone else, and I get a call from Mr. the Big Man. Because I wrote a headline in our notes. So the way we do this is I find stories and I write a 2-sentence summary. So you can look at it. It's basically for me to jog my memory because sometimes I'll pull stories weeks in advance.
Sure.
So it just helps me jog my memory. Okay, I read the story. I know what this is about. So it's in there. I wrote the word heritage radio brand, meaning old company that does radio, right? Just like Heritage Automaker, meaning Ford makes electric car called Mustang Mach-E.
Does anybody under the age of 30 use the word heritage? No.
I'm not under the age of 30.
Go ahead. Anyway.
I'm like 30-something. So
okay.
There's a little confusion, but
all I'm saying is if I went to my 13-year-old and say, hey, what does heritage mean? They would not know, is all I'm saying. But go ahead.
Is our audience made up of 13-year-olds?
I'm just saying that you have a tendency to call me old for using old words and old whatever. Using the term heritage radio, first of all, does not ring the bell of. And then second of all, heritage radio is a company.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Anyway.
So let me rephrase.
So we had to clear things up because Danny,
dinosaur radio, and media conglomerate sees the asteroid in the sky. It's just podcasting on it, so it's like that. It's like that character in one of the Transformers movies where he's like, listen, they were going to take over, so I just decided to get on the winning side of this.
There you go.
Entercom,
anyway.
which a new company, which is an old company that has rebranded itself as Audacy.
Audacy.
No, Audacy.
Audacy.
Like Odyssey, like Honda Odyssey, but it's spelled stupidly. Yeah. They have the dumbest. Let me just say something. As far as rebrands go, they rebranded with a cool name, but a logo from 1970.
Well, that seems to be this weird look. And again, I get why they're rebranding. This has another thing of kind of being nimble and kind of whatever.
Yeah.
They want to go from being known as a radio company, which they own radio stations all across the country. They want to go from being known as a radio station to this pivotal. We're embracing, still going to own our radio stations, but we're embracing podcasting. And they want to kind of get rid of, because it's hard sometimes when you've been around a long time and you're known for one thing, it's hard to get anybody to ever look at you for something else, right? Yeah. So I am all for, again, rebranding and embracing change. In this case, it's podcast. I agree that the CEO, David Fields, I'm going to read this quote. I agree with this 100%. Says, it was time for a new identity, a new brand that really reflects the depth and breadth of all the things that we do and the ambitions and vision that we have going forward. Podcasting is the number one creator of audio content in the United States. I agree with that moving forward, and I think that area of radio stations, traditional radio, being more and more about music and more, less about the morning drive shows and the afternoon drive shows and stuff like this, and it already has for the last 15 years, and podcasting picking up that torch of talk radio. Right. I think that there's no truer definition of that going in the next 10 years.
Absolutely. So, what's interesting is Entercom is this, like I said, a dinosaur. Legacy media is probably the word I should have used.
Yeah, legacy media makes way more sense.
So it's a legacy media conglomerate. I think Entercom also owns TV stations, if I'm correct. But
I think so.
Yeah. Cumulus, which owns Westwood One and Podcast One. Clear Channel used to be called iHeart, and they used to be called Clear Channel. They became iHeart Radio, then they became iHeart Media. Right. Now iHeart actually reports their podcasting revenue separate from their radio revenue. So they're actually already moving towards. So here's all that's going to happen for companies like now Audacy, formerly Entercom, Cumulus, and iHeart. It used to be radio, TV, traditional media, and they still own Clear Channel Outdoor. It's still called Clear Channel Outdoor, which is their billboards. Then it used to be podcasting down here, and all that's happening is an inversion. Right?
Absolutely. Well, and companies like Spotify, whatever. Look, you've got a company like this. Again, we keep talking about you're growing or you're dying, right? There's no third direction. This company is doing everything it can to stay relevant to investors going forward when you have companies like Spotify or whatever. And guess what? They're doing the same thing. They introduced a partner. They announced a partnership with Demi Lovato, BetMGM to get on. We talked about several times the last couple of weeks about betting apps. And yes. Again, I think that's huge going forward in the future.
The marriage of sports talk radio and betting apps.
Absolutely.
Right? That's huge. And the reason I pull up stories like this is because I learned something from them, and I want to bring that to our audience if that's valuable to people. And the reason I think this is interesting is I think there's a strong FOMO out there in the world of the great big wide world of podcasting. There's FOMO. Like, I should have started 10 years ago. Let me tell you something. If you had a sucky idea 10 years ago and you put out a podcast, no one would still be listening.
Right. Absolutely.
If you put out you could start from scratch today. If you have a good product, people will buy into it. The beauty is you don't have to be first man through the wall. There's that quote from the movie Moneyball, and it's who's ever the Red Sox manager's character is saying, first man through the wall gets bloody, second man through the wall gets rich. And, it's the pioneer versus buccaneer. The pioneer is the guy who's going to go innovate this thing. And, if you want to parallel, let's look at tech. Napster. Nothing. Right. You got nothing. The guy who started Napster today is not even worth $1 billion. He might be worth $10 million. $10 million is great. It's better than a kick in the shorts. But you know who made $1 billion? You know who's worth damn near $1 trillion?
Who's that?
Apple. iTunes looked at freaking Napster completely disrupted the market. And iTunes came in and said, here's how we make all this legal and accessible to people.
Absolutely.
They sold people the tracks. They sold them the devices. So there is still, we have not reached peak podcast. We're not going to get there for a long time.
I think it'll take decades just because of the amount of people there are. Because if you know a person right now, and usually we've gotten to the point where everybody knows at least that one guy friend that's really into podcast, you know that podcast friend of yours is constantly complaining that they've listened to everything. That they've run out of things to listen to. And they go to Twitter and they say, hey, who's got more podcasts? Because the fact is there's not enough content for that podcast. Even the current small percentage that it is, there's not enough content, good content, that that's driven by what people want. That true crime is a big thing in podcasting, right?
That's for chicks, though. That's for chicks.
I'm just saying it's a genre of podcasting that is in high demand. Right?
It's for chicks that when they're driving to Target to spend all their husband's money.
Right. Trying to figure out how to knock them off for life insurance, right? Is that where you're going with it?
Anyway, precisely.
The point is there's so many people that room to grow for podcast listeners is so big that once we get into cars where people are listening to it in their cars, like they did radio, like they are currently doing satellite radio, right? I think satellite radio would be a great future for podcasting. Satellite radio picking up more podcast type channels, like they have sports radio talk channels, and this kind of stuff. If we ever got a podcasting radio station on satellite radio, I think it would grow and grow and grow. Right. And I think there's an opportunity for Entercom here. I don't understand
Audacy.
Why they wouldn't.
They're called Audacy.
I'm sorry, Audacy now. Entercom became Audacy. I don't know exactly when that went into effect, but the point is I think there's still a marriage. People still get in their cars and turn on the radio. Right?
Sure.
There are technology type people out there, like my buddy that doesn't listen to the radio. He plugs in his phone to his radio, every time he gets in. There's satellite radio. There's alternatives. But the fact is, most of America still gets in their car and turns on the radio station. Why has traditional radio, not taken some dumb, 97.3 whatever that nobody listens to anymore and transitioned it to a podcast only talk radio station where they just feed in these, you know what I mean? Why hasn't that happened? Why isn't that?
Why would you give away our entire business plan, you ding dong?
I'm just saying I don't understand. You have all these people out there. You have this legacy, as we should say,
legacy
media.
Listen,
that has not caught on to this way yet, and I don't get it.
Because if you go to a hardcore history with Dan Carney, I think that's the guy who hosts that, and you say, hey, we want to license your back catalog, right? And we're just going to play it on some AM station, and we're going to license it for X number of dollars. There are so many people that will just tune in because they're driving somewhere. Because I don't want to pull up the app and then I have caps on my data because of the deal I signed with T-Mobile. I could have got unlimited, but I have an app. So I have to download. So I sincerely, I have decent Wi-Fi. I will be in the garage of my house. So I'm trying to make a 10-minute drive to HEB.
Exactly.
I'm waiting 8 minutes to download a podcast so I can make a 10-minute drive to HEB. So, I think that is, you're entirely correct. And I think there is someone out there right now at a company going, nobody cares about a top 40 anymore, right?
Right. Why not switch it?
Let's flip our sports talk radio to our top 40 channel.
Yep.
And flip that old talk station, the sports talk, because sports talk is still a legacy media avenue that is going to be profitable for the foreseeable future. People still care about that.
You tie that into betting. Like, you just tie that into betting.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sports talk radio shows, the Pat McAfee Show, right? They do it live Monday through Friday. They are not on traditional radio. They started out on traditional radio and figured out very quickly that they wanted to curse and talk about things that they couldn't on regular radio. And I think that may be the issue with a lot of podcasters going on radio, is it's got a lot of legacy rules around it, right? The FCC and stuff like that.
But I think the person who goes to license that media says, hey, we can cut out those parts.
Absolutely,
right?
Or bleep over them like they do radio songs and hip hop back in the day and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think but Pat McAfee Show or whatever, they have now spawned out of that what was originally a just a sports talk podcast, right? They did on YouTube Live and now other things. That's spawned 2 other shows. You have an actual podcast that came out of the show that's not during the show, and you now have actually started this week called the Hammer Down. DAHN for some reason, Hammer Down, but it's a sports betting podcast that used to be part of the show, part of the 3 hours a day show that became so popular that it's now become its own show and already has 1 million subscribers inside a week.
Wow.
And it's a couple of guys from that live show doing just sports book betting where they deep dive into it. Now that's just for people that want to do that, but it's going to grow, and it's going to continue to grow, and I think legacy radio needs to get in on that sooner.
And here's my favorite thing out of this, not my favorite thing, something that I find enjoyable or humorous. There are so many podcast networks, and I'm in the industry. We're in the industry, okay?
Right.
I'm at the cross section of I do a podcast, but it's a podcast about business. So I'm doubly interested in the subject. There's 2 reasons I'm interested. But Audacy, or Audacy,
yeah.
Or Entercom already owned 2 podcasting networks. So they owned Candace 13, never heard of them. Pineapple Street Studios, also never heard of them. Who are these people?
And you're right in podcasting. That if I had a frustration with podcasting, and this is any company in the beginning, right? Any big change in the beginning, is there are too many podcasting networks, so you can have great shows. Our show should be bigger than it is right now. Now that's my opinion, being part of the show. I am the big man. We should have a bigger, audience. Danny doesn't like to say, but I
want us to have a bigger audience so we can get paid more, dude.
How do you find podcasts in today's world? It's hard. You type podcast into YouTube, you only get the top 4 or 5 podcasts on YouTube. You don't find all these podcasts. Same thing on Apple Podcasting, same thing on Anchor or any of these.
Right.
The fact is there's too many places. Not everybody is everywhere because a lot of these places try to get you to buy into their product their way. You and I have looked at several podcasting places out there that they want you on their podcasting platform. And guess what? This is even the bigger ones like Spotify. A lot of them, right, they're buying unique rights to the Joe Rogan show, right, or whatever. Right. So you have to go to their product. The problem is if you're not one of those big names, how does everyone out there looking for you find it? And the fact is eventually, like you were just talking about Entercom buys 5, 6, 7 different companies. The reason they own hundreds of radio stations is because back in the day, radio stations were owned by individual companies. And then throughout the 70s and 80s, these bigger companies came in and go, no, we need to start buying up these so we can create some consistency, which led to a better product, which led to your Howard Sterns and you know what I mean? These bigger names by combining companies. Podcasting needs to do the same thing. Right.
And I do think, though, it's good that there's some competition. And I think there is platform ubiquity, meaning if we distribute our podcast on
Anchor.fm.
Yeah, on Anchor. I blanked out for a second there. We deliver our podcast, and that spits it out everywhere, right?
Right.
So there is no longer going to be, we're only available like there is in the case of Joe Rogan and that type of thing. But for the average podcaster out there, the guy starting out, he can be on your phone the same way Joe Rogan's on your phone. You can get Idiots vs. Idiots on Spotify. We're right next to freaking Joe Rogan, right?
Well, I'm just saying that if Spotify or Audacity wants to come in and buy our, in exclusivity, they should. Just reach out. We should. You should
actually,
do it now before we're too big.
Yeah, because right now, Barstool's offer was not big enough, right? And Portnoy wouldn't even get on the phone with me. He had some intermediary talk to me. I was like, I want to talk to Portnoy. Like, nah.
That's right.
I was like, if we're not a big enough deal for the CEO and founder of the company to talk to us, I don't want to do a deal with you.
Just get out of here.
Like, what is this piddly 6-figure offer? Like, come on.
Get out of here. Get out of here.